The night in Los Angeles fell thick and electrified, like a dark curtain over a stage on the verge of collapse. It was March 9th, 1997, and inside the Peterson Automotive Museum, the atmosphere was charged with that lethal blend of euphoria and threat that only the hip-hop war could conjure. Outside, streetlights bathed the asphalt in an icy glow, and distant echoes of sirens and engines reverberated between the palm trees. Inside, rap stars, producers, and security personnel exchanged sharp glances, aware that every small detail could trigger a greater tragedy. Christopher Wallace, known to the world as the Notorious B.I.G, moved backstage with that imposing presence forged in the hardness of Brooklyn. The air smelled of a mix of expensive perfume, sweat, and hastily extinguished cigarettes. The clock crept toward midnight, and the after-party for the Soul Train Awards grew murky, with the typical agitation of a high-risk event. The audience and artists knew that each step helped shape a story of rivalries that were not only musical but deadly. Hip-hop in the 90s was more than styles and lyrics. It was a battlefield. Bad Boy Records and the East Coast, with Wallace as its undisputed titan, backed by his friend and producer, Sean Puff Daddy Combs, fought for dominance against the West Coast, led by Marion Sook, Knight's Death Row Records. A public feud, fueled by venomous verses and the realities of gang violence, in which the lives of its leaders, Tupac Shakur and Wallace, became symbols and targets. The memory still raw. 6 months earlier, Tupac had been gunned down in Las Vegas, his death still fresh, almost throbbing in the collective memory of the rap community. In every corner of the Peterson Automotive Museum flowed that tension, camouflaged under forced cordiality. Some attendees, aware of the historical fragility, watched every entrance, every shadow. Surveillance cameras were limited, technology still precarious in a world without social networks. The anonymity of the night was an ally for both victims and perpetrators. As the party drew to its end, the urgent siren of a fire truck shattered the crescendo. Forced to evacuate due to overcrowding concerns, in reality to avoid greater conflicts, B.I.G, Puff Daddy, and their entourage stepped out into the cold night. The group's black Suburbans awaited them, chrome surfaces reflecting the red flashes of emergency lights. It was close to 12:30 a.m. Wallace, bearing the weight of his fame and recent threats, settled into the second Suburban, accompanied by his team. The vehicle was a fleeting refuge, the air thick with tension and fatigue. Outside, the streets of Wilshire Boulevard seemed sluggish, but behind the windows, the alertness bordered on hysteria. At approximately 12:45 a.m., as the convoy stopped at a red light on the corner of Wilshire and South Fairfax, a dark Chevy Impala emerged from the shadows and positioned itself beside the rear passenger window of Wallace's Suburban. The Impala's engine hummed deeply, its metallic sheen barely visible under the streetlights. Inside, an African-American man dressed in a blue suit, white shirt, and bow tie sat rigid, still, almost ethereal under the dim light. Without eye contact, without any apparent disruption in the surroundings, the driver's window slid down slightly. Time seemed to stop, quickened breaths, damp palms on thighs, eyes scanning the rearview mirror for any sign of danger, and then, like a meticulously rehearsed choreography, the man's arm emerged with a 9mm pistol loaded with gecko armor-piercing rounds, bullets nearly impossible to acquire legally in the United States. 4 sharp, devastating shots tore through the silence of the night. The sound, a visceral, hollow echo, bounced off nearby walls and spread panic in seconds. Shards of glass, the smell of hot metal, and blood soaking the Suburban's upholstery sketched a scene as brutal as it was unforgettable. Wallace collapsed onto himself. Confusion erupted in screams and chaotic movements among those traveling with him. The other vehicles sped through red lights and blaring horns, while some bystanders ran toward the crime scene with horrified faces, barely aware of the magnitude of what had just happened. In under a minute, the Impala disappeared into the darkness. Chaos was absolute. Puff Daddy, pale with panic, pressed his friend's wounds as the Suburban raced through the avenues towards Cedars-Sinai Hospital. The vehicle's interior, saturated with adrenaline and desperation, now smelled of gunpowder and death. Outside, the city seemed detached, but the echo of the gunshots already coursed through the empty corridors of the Los Angeles dawn. Wallace was pronounced dead at 1:15 a.m. Medical staff, unaware of his fame but accustomed to fatality, could only look with resignation at the violence once again staining Los Angeles. The body, imposing even in death, was transferred to the morgue under the watchful gaze of the police. The news spread with the speed of an electric spark, flooding newsrooms, radio stations, and late-night television networks. Within minutes, the death of the Notorious B.I.G. unleashed an unprecedented media frenzy. Headlines spoke of conspiracy, gang wars, and police failures. across the country in Brooklyn, the news hit fans and neighbors like a hammer blow who would soon flood the streets in silent grief and vigil. The multi-platform machinery of rumors and speculation roared to life. There was talk of Suge Knight pulling strings from his cell, of a hitman named Wardell Pucci, Faust, as a possible shooter, and of dark police connections. Amir Muhammad, a name repeated in leaked documents but never formally charged, gleamed through frantic reports and FBI files. In the early hours, neither the police nor the press managed to sustain a coherent narrative. Wallace's funeral, held in Brooklyn a few weeks later, was massive and deafening. Thousands of fans crowded sidewalks and rooftops, improvising altars among columns of smoke, and the reverent murmur of Juicy and Big Poppa playing from radios and classic cars. The funeral procession, surrounded by motorcyclists and adorned with bouquets, moved slowly through the crowd. The collective lament was not just for the death of a musician, it was the epitaph of an era, the heartbreaking confirmation that the American dream could decay into rivers of blood. Meanwhile, the investigation into his murder would become marked by contradictions and lethal omissions. Initially, the police, aware of public and media scrutiny, promised results, but doubt soon overtook them. Eyewitnesses avoided testifying, fearing lethal reprisals. Some, confronted with the weight of history and their proximity to criminal networks, visibly trembled during the few interrogations that were obtained. The early investigations faced a judicial and operational quagmire. The Los Angeles Police Department, besieged by old ghosts of corruption and internal scandals, clashed with the absolute distrust of the African American community, which viewed the crime as yet another chapter in a long list of unanswered injustices. Essential details, area footage, undisclosed testimonies, even the caliber of the armor-piercing bullets were omitted in official files, archived, or simply vanished. Behind the apparent chaos, a deeper and more dangerous tapestry was woven. The most thorough investigations, such as the one led by former detective Greg Kading, focused on the relationship between Knight, Pucci Faust, and intermediary Teresa Swan. According to his reconstruction, the order to eliminate Wallace originated from a death row cell, traveled through prison corridors, crossed coded phone calls, and ended behind the wheel of that Chevy Impala in the hands of Foos. FBI documents leaked in 2003 and interviews collected by the Wallace family cultivated an even more chilling theory. Officers such as David Mack and Rafael Perez, tied to the Rampart scandal and with direct links to death row, may have acted as protectors, if not participants, in the homicide. Mack, owner of a vehicle similar to the Black Impala, appeared among the investigated, and his bank records suggested movements consistent with a hit payment, but no conclusive charges were ever filed. The story became tangled in an unmanageable judicial web. Lawsuits from the Wallace family opened colossal cracks in the LAPD, federal litigation brought to light evidence ignored for years, and new autopsies, some leaked to the press in 2012, confirmed the caliber, number, and fatal trajectory of the bullets. However, each advance was smothered by layers of mystery, imposed silence, and the omnipresent fear of testifying. Deep within the courts, testimonies from key witnesses were simply ignored or, in the worst cases, disappeared behind curtains of threats and unspoken deals. One witness broke down during an interview, refusing to say a word about the alleged officers involved, with trembling hands and eyes permanently fixed on the exit door. On the other side, the press exploited every fissure. Documentaries, books, and films, such as City of Lies in 2018, revived the case with new hypotheses and reconstructions, multiplying versions and mythologizing those involved. Wallace's figure took root in the collective imagination, transforming his murder into an allegory of betrayal, greed, and institutional double standards. Fallen officers, record executives, and occasional gangsters paraded through the halls of public memory, wrapped in an impenetrable fog of suspicion. The case, after years of investigations, leaks, and judicial upheavals, remained without a definitive conviction. Neither the reports of FBI agent Phil Carson, nor Swan's illegal recordings, nor Mack's bank records managed to open the door to absolute truth. Fear, tribal loyalty, and institutional corruption built an invisible wall around the death of the Notorious B.I.G. In the background, African American society and the American music industry were forever marked. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry was no longer just an artistic dispute. It had become a killing field, where alliances with Bloods and Crips blurred the line between art and crime. Hip-hop saw its prophet die and created a myth, but it was a myth woven from the darkest threads of power, silence, and death. The last echo of that night still pulses in the streets of Los Angeles. Crossing the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax, the asphalt seems to retain the invisible trace of the Suburban and the Impala, while in the air one can perceive, like a persistent whisper, the promise that someday the truth will come to light. But until then, the murder of the Notorious B.I.G. remains a veiled, flickering nightmare, a crime suspended in time covered by an indelible shroud of fear, myth, and silence.